So you've all been staring at my slides for a while now, so I'll get started. Like they said, my name is Subramaniam. I'm a sophomore at Georgetown University up in DC, and I'm the executive director of Student Voice. And what Student Voice is a lot of big words that mean something very simple. We at Student Voice are dedicated to giving students a seat at the table in the policy decision-making processes that they are left out of. We believe that students deserve a say in their education, and we are a certified 501c3 entirely student-run nonprofit. But we didn't get here overnight. Progress came in waves, fits, and starts. And before Student Voice was ever an idea in my head, I took a class in middle school called Synergy. Synergy was a pilot course designed to introduce project-based learning into my school. Our teachers, Mr. Adams and Ms. Goff, challenged us to find a problem in our community and brainstorm a solution. In that class, not only did I learn fundamental problem-solving skills, but my teachers taught me that even as a student, I could make a difference, and that even within the confines of a traditional education system, change was possible. And I know a lot of us sit through these classes and we feel like, what are we learning? Why are we doing this? This isn't going to help me when I graduate and become a real person. But this class did. And it also is the reason I joined Twitter, which had a weirdly large impact on my life. Twitter is where the Student Voice story begins. Twitter is where I met my co-founder. Twitter is where the movement began. So I co-founded Student Voice in 2012 as a high school sophomore with two college students I met on the internet. So we were drawn together by this fundamental belief that in a world where the customer is always right, in education, students who are essentially the customers of the system are never heard. Administrative decisions are made by government mandate or your local policy-making board, what have you. Sometimes the teachers are consulted, but rarely, if ever, are students asked what they think. And so, through several late-night phone calls and Google Hangouts, we decided to create #StudVoice as a platform for students to share their stories and a place for them to be heard. So we began hosting regular Twitter chats every Monday night. And when we launched, the biggest group of people on Twitter were educators. So our Twitter chat was injecting students into conversations that were already happening between this large group of educators already on the platform. I remember when we first began, the idea of student voice and students having a say was just a buzzword. I went to my first education conference as a rising senior in high school, and I was the only student there, to my knowledge. I went to every session I could find with the word student in the title or the description, and I was shocked to find that all of these sessions that were supposedly talking about how to engage students had never really spoken to the students. There were teachers just spitballing ideas, which is great, but was really confusing to me. It was also at this conference that I first met my co-founder for the first time in person, 2 years after we'd co-founded and created the hashtag. It was there that we first started talking about the fundamental rights we believe all students deserve in their education, and a subject that would become the focus of our organization's first campaign years later. But just as I felt like things were starting to pick up steam and we were beginning to do something beyond just an online community, I moved to France for my junior year, which meant that I was quite literally out of the loop when it came to all things student voice, given the literal time difference. I remember setting an alarm for 2 a.m. some days just to make the Twitter chats, like when we had Arnie Duncan, who was at the time the Secretary of Education for the United States, for an Ask Me Anything style Twitter chat. It was then that I realized what I was missing and why I was doing what I was doing. Sure, the Twitter chats were great, and they were still the foundation of our organization, but we wanted to do more. So, my senior year of high school, we hosted the second Student Voice Live conference. The first conference had been much smaller, convening of just the core team members and a few representatives from several industries. The second conference was like a homecoming and a launch party rolled into one. We had speakers from Jackie Emerson, who was an actress in the Hunger Games, to Alexis Glick, who founded Fuel Up to Play 60, as well as students like Jack Andraka and Adora Spitak, whose passion as young students had gained them enormous success. At that conference, you could feel the energy, and people were talking about big, innovative ideas for education and its future. But all of the students at this conference were volunteers. Sure, the conference was sponsored by Microsoft and Dell, but none of us were getting paid. That all changed right after. Student Voice was reached out to by Cengage, the textbook company. They asked us to host a summit at South by Southwest. If any of you have heard of South by Southwest, you probably know of it as a large music festival that takes place in Austin, Texas every year. What a lot of people don't know is that South by Southwest also hosts an education conference every year, which happens to be one of the nation's largest. While sitting through a weekend of presentations and talking about school might not be the ideal way for a high schooler to spend a weekend, for me it felt like validation. For years, Student Voice had been just a hashtag, but now we were a real nonprofit. We were even getting paid, a little, to do things like host these sessions at South by Southwest and bring real students sharing their stories into the conversation. After Cengage, we began working with other organizations to bring Student Voice and students into their conferences. 2 years ago, we were invited to a White House convening on Next Generation High Schools where they asked us to just bring students. And it felt like somebody was listening because we were able to bring these students and they asked us, what do you think about high school? And we were able to tell them. This past fall, we worked with Facebook and I attended a conference where they launched their Inspire Ed campaign for positive school climate. And I facilitated a session where students were talking to teachers from their school and they were having a genuine conversation about what was working, what wasn't working, and what they wanted to do about it. So much has changed from my very first conference where there were no students. For the past 3 years, Student Voice has attended the Deeper Learning Conference in San Diego, hosted by the Hewlett Foundation. The first year we went there were like 5 students and they were just logistical aides, helping move the speakers from one place to the other and showing people where the food and the bathrooms were. Last year, when I attended that conference, I sat in on a session hosted by 2 high school juniors who'd planned and come up with the whole thing themselves. Student Voice has been a part of that change. The first year we attended that conference, we hosted a pre-conference solely for students to show the conference organizers that students wanted to get involved and that they had a lot to say and that they could make an impact if you only gave them the chance. So, at South by Southwest, we launched this platform called the Student Bill of Rights, which was 12 rights that we believe were pillars for the quality student education. And we came up with this through conversations with students at conferences like this and at Deeper Learning. After creating the Student Bill of Rights, we took to the streets. So we launched a national tour to speak with students in schools and find out how they felt their schools were doing in these big ideas. And in this national tour, we visited 52 cities, 19 states, spoke with over 400 students from 47 schools in 65 hours of roundtables. So the way we organize today has changed. It used to be that it would be only grassroots. You would take to the streets and you'd work in your local communities. But now, thanks to the internet, so much more is possible. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I met my team through Twitter. And while we've met more and more frequently as the years have gone on, the day-to-day operations still take place majority online. Our monthly director meetings take place on Google Hangouts. And what's incredible about this is that it has allowed us to work wherever we are. It means that when I graduated high school in Atlanta and moved to DC, I didn't have to quit doing what I love to do. I didn't have to stop doing this work that I feel so passionate about because the network was still there. Normally when you're involved in like a small nonprofit, it's very local. And what I found to be the beauty of organizing the 21st century is that the sky's the limit now. So you may be asking yourself, this all sounds well and good, but all of this work must cost money. And if you're a nonprofit, how are you alive? How are you running? And honestly, it's a really good question. When we started, we were basically funded by donations or project-based grants, which allowed us to launch things like the Student Bill of Rights and our national tour. But now, as we're nearing 5 years as an organization, we've begun thinking long-term. Our board of directors up there has begun planning how we can be more sustainable as an organization and leverage the power of high school students to continue our organization's work. We've come a really long way since I was a high school student and had that crazy idea to start Twitter chat. Sure, I'd say hosting a roundtable or a session at a conference is progress. Getting invited to the White House was even better. But our work will only be done when the US education system undergoes real change to address the big problems at its core. And that is only possible when students, like most of you, use your voice. So my challenge to you is to find something you're interested in and see where it overlaps with the problem in your community. It can be big, it can be small, it can be in education, it can be in writing, whatever you want. And when you find that, hit me up and let's work on it.